We ended chapter 15 by saying that although there are those who see the unraveling of society as good, it appears that there is a large swath of Americans who are blissfully unaware of this intentional dismantling of the American way of life. Yet, there are also those who do know something is amiss and who are desperately trying to reverse the tides. Chapter 16, Unraveled. You won't find those attempting to reverse course, right the ship, rebuild the lintel, or reweave the fabric in political office or by switching political parties. Those who go into politics with the intent of trying to make a difference find out very quickly that the political system does not reward ethics, values, and truth. And the corruption and the compromising of values and principles are deeply rooted within not just government, but both major national parties. This is why people can accuse the other of the very crimes their in group are committing and be right, regardless of which party the accused individual belongs to. And relying on a political party to repair the fabric is like ripping the tapestry out of the mouth of one alligator and throwing it to another. I'm going to say something controversial here that I avoid saying in the book, and I may have already said something similar in an earlier episode. Although the political elites are of the same cloth, regardless of which of the major parties you are examining, the Democrats have overtly, obviously, and without hesitation or remorse, the Democrats have been pushing and endorsing and promoting the progressive movement through removing the idea of God and natural law from their national platform, and also by being the ones who are changing definitions, declaring that we need to overturn the Constitution, demonstrating a desire to tear down monuments and rewrite history and convince everyone that the greater good, the common good, is much more important than freedom. The Democrats are the ones that have lobbed the most damaging salvos, have turned killing human beings into celebratory events. They are the ones who have convinced people that lies are truth, and the et cetera, et cetera. It can go on and on. It is truly amazing to me that there are still Democrats, rank and file Democrats, who don't see this, who are willfully blind for whatever reason. But this is not to say the Republicans are innocent, because while the Democrats do not hide their intentions, they are very obvious with their words and their policies and what they plan to do. The lies are obvious with the Democrats. The Republicans, I mean, some people call them they say they act more like a controlled opposition, but it's also, to me, obvious they are just as complicit in the process of division. We talked about this as I hammered home this idea of democracy, that it relies upon division and division and division, and the Republicans are just as complicit in that. But you have to understand that the Republican elites also want control, just like the Democrat elites. And because there are those in the Republican Party who are just like their Democrat counterparts, because they manipulate feelings to impose their supposed value system on the losers, they are I think, even more insidious. The Republicans are not obvious. They don't tell you that they're going after your liberty. They don't tell you about the common good, but they use and manipulate emotions of their bases just like the Democrats. They also want control, just like the Democrats, but they're not as obvious, and they're not telling the truth about the lies that they're telling, in other words. So instead of the traditional left versus right, liberal versus conservative, the kind of the traditional political spectrum where the Democrats are on the left traditionally and conservatives are on the right, and I could do a whole episode just about what a political spectrum entails traditionally, but instead I created a completely new political spectrum to account for the way I see things. And of course, this is the world according to Dorothy, so this is why I'm putting it up here. And it does not measure conservatism or liberalism, because those terms are pretty much meaningless, especially as they continue to evolve. So I don't want to confuse, left and right in this instance. So the only reason I use the arrow starting on the left and pointing to the right is because we read left to right. And I see our country, as gradually moving toward tyranny in the direction of that arrow and away from liberty where the arrow starts. So this new spectrum, I hope, will allow any Americans who are willing to listen to it and watch it, will allow Americans to decide not whether they're Republican or Democrat, conservative or liberal, progressive or whatever, but it should allow Americans to decide how liberty-minded they are. So you'll see at the far left, the extreme left, which is really odd because these people are often put on the far right within the traditional spectrums, and because they're basically seen as crazies by most people, and they definitely don't fit what we call the traditional notion of liberal, not even classical liberal. There's nothing really liberal about them, but in my new spectrum, they are still crazies in some ways, but they're on the left because they favor liberty to the extreme. They are so extreme in their favoring of liberty, and we call these people the sovereign citizen. These are people who don't pay taxes, they don't register their vehicles, they don't get licenses, they most often live off grid, they don't vote. One might say they actually fear government, and they are willing to defend their homes and their property and their families with force. And I'm talking like arms and bullets and stuff, should any government agents show up. There aren't really many of these types of people, and in reality, if they are left alone, they'll generally just take care of themselves, and you never really have to worry about them as long as you don't come on their property. But the sovereign citizen, they don't think they need government at all. There's no good use for government, and thus they find any interventions by government an infringement of or on their basic rights and liberties. But right after this very small group of Americans is this box I have where most Americans live. And this is the biggest box on the spectrum. And I'm not sure most Americans realize this, that we are mostly in agreement on most things. Because, there's a spectrum inside this box as well. On the left side inside this box are the traditional quote-unquote libertarians. They're not extreme anti-government like sovereign citizens, but they dislike government intervention. And if they are truly ideological libertarians, they will have arguments against government intervention in any sector of American life. But right next to them, we have another, probably this is where the biggest box is of Americans, constitutionalists. I call these people constitutionalists because these are people who prefer Americans who prefer government intervention only if such intervention is demonstrably constitutional. They argue for true federalism, including states' rights and state power over national or centralized power. But they also understand that government can be useful, from water management to building and maintaining reliable infrastructure. These people also believe in the necessity for a social safety net, especially for the elderly and disabled. They see a need for law and order to ensure daily security and normalcy within which they're able then to participate in society. They believe in the free market, but with some regulation, especially against monopolies and against fraud and abuse by the more powerful entities in the system. And that's why this is where most entrepreneurs and small businesses reside. They are Lockean in their desire for civil liberties and natural rights to be protected by the government. But they also shudder at the high level of spending by the federal government and might accuse the federal, again, we're talking central government, of government overreach, especially through overregulation. But like I said, even the constitutionalists are on a spectrum. So as we move to the right, there are those who prefer government intervention if they agree with the policy and it can be achieved through at least, nominal constitutional means. The farther to the right we go with this group, the closer to tyranny, the more they believe in voting to come to unity of decision. And the more likely they are to believe we live in a democracy because of that. But they still insist on government conforming to the form, if not the spirit, of the US Constitution. And I label these people the Republicrats, because these are usually the vast majority of the rank and file members of both the Democrat and Republican parties, who, once upon a time, even in my lifetime, were very, very close together on the original or traditional political spectrum. So next we have the second largest group. My husband actually thinks they may be the largest group now, but these are what I call the apathetic dependents. They're not all dependent in the same way, though. These people really don't pay attention as long as their life goes on as normal and uninterrupted. And their way of life is dependent on government control over several sectors within society. But they don't see the connection there, or they don't care, as long as their lives continue on as they always have. Also in this group, though, are those who rely on government for resources for everyday needs and their day-to-day security. But again, they never think about how their dependence is the same thing as allowing government control over their lives. And then we get to kind of the far right on my spectrum, the box that actually favors tyranny. Again, there is a spectrum within the box as well, within this box as well. But the two main groups here, and they are in parallel, the two main groups are the radical progressives and the national conservatives. To their left, we kind of find big business, a group that benefits when their particular brand of tyrant is in power, as they have enough power to garner favors and know how to exploit the system as it is. We could talk about crony capitalism. It doesn't matter which political party they attach themselves to. There are these, big business groups that attach themselves to the policies and to the benefits that one of the two major parties can provide for them. And to their right, to the ones who know how to exploit the system as it is set up, right up to the edge, these are the ones who favor tyranny the most, the political and financial elites. And it is important to note that while the radical progressives are influential in the Democratic Party, the national conservatives are becoming more and more influential in the Republican Party. And when I'm speaking about favoring tyranny by the elites, that favoritism for power in their own hands, that influence moving the country ever increasingly toward tyranny, is in both political parties. Elites on the traditional, quote unquote, right are trying to centralize their conservatism and codify their brand of morality, while elites on the traditional, quote unquote, left are trying to centralize their progressivism and codify their brand of morality. We can see this in their unique brands of anti-woman policy, racist rhetoric, intrusion upon bodily or medical autonomy, and parents' rights. You may not know what I'm talking about, but both sets of elites are on the same side of these social issues. They just frame them differently to appeal to their quote-unquote bases. So, relying on your political party, relying on elections even to fix this torn and shredded fabric, to shore up the pillars, relying on politics as usual to repair the fabric is indeed like ripping the tapestry out of the mouth of one alligator and tossing it to another. But that is not the only way Americans look for solutions. The very American view that money can fix it is perhaps the most destructive message of all. Throwing money at education has not served to improve test scores or graduation rates. The money must be accompanied by shared values and a plan. Throwing money at the war on drugs did not help us win that particular war. Although crack might have been depopularized, There is enough fentanyl on our streets to kill each and every one of us. Money has indeed helped in the shredding of the fabric and shaping the narrative that brought us to the breaking point. So it may seem to make sense to throw money at the problem from the other side, but in search of money to finance solutions, many good-hearted individuals lose sight of the goal as they continue to buy into the prevailing narrative and try to work within a framework that is designed to work against them.